Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj. Welcome to His Holiness Candramauli Swami daily call. And it's our great pleasure that we are having association of His Grace Bhutabhavana Prabhu today. Bhutabhavana Prabhu is going to enlighten us today on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, verse 28, if that's correct, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Bhutabhavana Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj, and all glories to you.
All glories to Guru Maharaj, all glories to the devotees, all glories to Candramauli Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, should I share that screen with that verse, or should I pass that control to you?
No, you can share the screen.
Okay.
And then we'll just say prayers, and then we'll go into it. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, first I just want to say it's really wonderful to be able to be here with all of you and to be in the purifying association of the devotees and also the purifying association of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So as Prabhu said, we're reading from first canto, chapter 11, text number 28. So this is a very wonderful series of verses, and it's talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah, his interactions with his devotees. So I'll read the Sanskrit, transliteration, translation, the purport, and then we can have some discussion on that. Okay, so before I get on, I'm also going to request the blessings of all the devotees. So hopefully we can say something that will be pleasing to the Guru Parampara. Also, it's really wonderful to see Anantacharya, Jairade, so many others who are here. Okay, so Pravishtastu Graham Petruho Parishvat Bhakta Swamatribihi Vavande Shirasha Sapta Devaki Pramukta Mudha. Transliteration Pravishtaha, after entering. Two, but Graham, houses. Pitraho, of the father. Parisvaktaha, embraced. Swamatribihi, by his own mothers. Bhavande, offered obeisances. Shirasha, his head. Sapta, 7. Devaki, Pramukta, headed by. Mudha, gladly. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. After entering the house of his father, he was embraced by the mothers present, and the Lord offered his obeisances unto them by placing his head at their feet. The mothers were headed by Devaki, his real mother. Purport: it appears that Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna, had completely separated residential quarters where he lived with his 18 wives, out of whom Srimati Devaki is the real mother of Lord Krishna. But in spite of all this, all other stepmothers were equally affectionate to him, as will be evident from the following verse. Lord Krishna also did not distinguish his real mother from his stepmothers, and he equally offered his obeisances unto all the wives of Vasudeva present on the occasion. According to scriptures also, there are 7 mothers. 1, the real mother. 2, the wife of the spiritual master. 3, the wife of a brahmana. 4, the wife of the king. 5, the cow. 6, the nurse. And 7, the earth. All of them are mothers. Even by this injunction of the Shastras, the stepmother, who is the wife of the father, is also as good as the mother, because the father is also one of the spiritual masters. Lord Krishna, the Lord of the universe, plays the part of an ideal son just to teach others how to treat their stepmothers. Very, very interesting, interesting verse. So yeah, let's say prayers and then we can have some discussion. Amagyanatamurandasya Gyananjana Shilakaya Chakshu Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Zahagana Raganatam Vitam Twam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakamvatamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in this place in the Bhagavatam, the Lord is in Dwaraka, and so he here is interacting with his relatives. So after entering the house of his father, he was embraced by the mothers, plural, present, and he offered his obeisances unto them by placing his head at their feet. It's a very, very beautiful pastime. It's very touching because it speaks to the heart of this transcendental personalism that we have as our philosophy. In other words, we love a person. We love a real person. We don't love just a concept, an idea, an energy. But what we're seeing here is just how touching it is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is interacting in very deep and loving ways with his associates. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has already told us, Avajananti mam muda manusim tanamashritam parambhav majananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. He says, fools deride me when I come in my form, in my personal form. Okay? He said that when I come in my personal form, they don't understand my position. It's very, very interesting. When he interacts personally, the tendency of the conditioned living entities is to deny that this person is Krishna. And that is the theme of Kali Yuga. The theme of Kali Yuga is the denial of personalism. And it is due to this denial of personalism that people are starving for real relationship, either on a human level or on a transcendental level. I was thinking about this earlier today. So we were speaking sometimes about the importance of understanding ourselves. And to be very honest, to be very transparent, there were some people who I knew, and they were deliberately trying to play down the idea. So what their mood was, don't worry about all that stuff, just do anything that you're told. And I remember thinking that mentality is, to be honest, in some ways cultish. When we try to deny the individuality, either in our conditioned sense or on the spiritual platform, then it leads to other issues. There are there are mainstream psychologists and speakers who are now talking increasingly about the need for authenticity and attachment. That these are deep needs, and of course they are mirrored on the human platform, but they are completely manifest on the spiritual platform. You see, there's many different ways in which a society can become degraded. Okay? Many different ways in which a society can become degraded. One way of degrading society is to deny God. Okay, actually, let me take it back. The first degradation is to deny the spiritual personalism of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to deny that he has his own specific form. We say Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. He has his own specific name, form, Rupa, Guna, qualities, Lila, loving exchanges with his devotees. Okay? So that's the first major issue. We try to kill God's personalism. Okay, that's the first issue. But at least there's a God. There's a conception of God. We've destroyed, or we've tried to cover the fact that he's a real individual. The first degradation of human existence. The second degradation is, okay, we've got rid of the fact that he's a person, and that's degrading. But that's now opened the door to the second level of degradation. The second level of degradation is because I got rid of the fact that he's an actual person. Now I can get rid of him even as being some kind of conception or energy. So first we get rid of the supreme personality of Godhead. Then it's easy to get rid of God as any kind of supreme being in any way. Then the third degradation is to get rid of the personalism of the individuals in Kali Yuga. Right? So then we try to make out that everyone is just the same. And in order to do that, we have to start to suppress the natural individuality of people. Right? So that third degradation is when you destroy this idea of natures. Then everyone starts to think that actually I should just be like everyone else. And then of course we can't do it because we have a nature. That's what the Bhagavad Gita says, that's what Krishna says. So you get rid of the personality of Godhead, then you get rid of God. Then you get rid of the personality, the individuality of human beings. And then Krishna only knows what that leads to. So these are degradations. What does Prabhupada do? He comes to re-establish the source, the original conception, because if that original conception can be re-established, everything else will then naturally manifest. In other words, you get rid of the seed, right? You get rid of the seed, then everything will start to go, okay? Because there's no crops, there's no fruits, there's no trees. And therefore, because there's no sustenance, then people can't eat. Then those people start to decay and grow. Then you lose civilization. But if you can get the seed back in the soil, if that seed can grow, then that seed will manifest its full form. That full form will sustain the other living entities, right? That every plant, every growth, it is part of an ecosystem, and it sustains some other aspects of the ecosystem. So we are part of the manifestation, the existence that has been brought into manifestation by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We're his parts and parcels. Mamai vamso jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. Manashishtani indriyani prakritishtani kashati. Here, when Prabhupada is writing, expanding on this verse, he's also re-establishing not just God, he's re-establishing the personality of Godhead after entering the house of his father. Isn't that interesting? For those who've been engaging in this cycle of samsara, birth, death, old age, disease, in many different lifetimes, in many different human lifetimes, engaged in many different religions. This is the goal of all those religions. But now we understand that same supreme person, that same supreme God, he's a person. In fact, not only is he a person, he has a loving heart, loving dealings. What happened in human history, what happened that underpinned some of the greatest atrocities in human history? What happened was when a particular group in human society were able to deny the individuality of another group, were able to deny the personalism of another group, they were then able to commit all kinds of atrocious activities towards that group, because after all, they weren't real people. And the idea was that because they're not real people, if we torture them, abuse them, mistreat them, it actually doesn't matter, because after all, they're not real people. Which means what? If they're not real people, they don't have real feelings. If they don't have real feelings, they don't have real emotions. If they don't have real emotions, they don't have real value. They don't have real value. So it is not so clear to human society, but actually when you have a human civilization which tries to erase or cover the personalism of God. It is the first step to so many other issues that can take place in human civilization. Because as above, so below. When we deny that we all come from a common a common source, what does Krishna say? Aham savasi prabhavo mata savam pravata te iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samamvita. When we deny that we come from a common source, then of course it doesn't matter how much training people talk about in terms of diversity, there will be issues, because without the balance of the source of Krishna, it is inevitable that we will have man against woman. We will have one race versus another, because Krishna is the source of the unity and the diversity. In other words, I recognize myself to be part of the family because there is the commonality of us being all parts and parcels of the same source. The same, what is it Krishna says? Sarva karana karanam. We're all coming from the same cause, the cause of all causes. So it is not so clearly understood, but it is a fact that unless humanity accepts this deep truth about the common cause, that everything is coming from Krishna, even if we have a nice idea and a nice feeling and a nice concept that we should be unified, the compelling basis for that unity will not be present. In other words, the spiritual is the source of stability for the social. Yeah, it is from the spiritual platform and the compelling values, right? Not beliefs, because everyone can say that they believe different things. And if we're all human and we all believe different things, no one can say that their belief is better than someone else's. It's not possible to establish in an authoritative and objective way that this is how we should treat each other, unless we accept, recognize, and appreciate the true spiritual paradigm of Krishna consciousness and true transcendental religion. It's very, very important. Why is our society rocked by so many challenges? Many of those challenges are challenges of relativism. Relativism means that you have your idea, I have my idea, and then we just fight. Now there's a certain naivety that we have in modern civilization. What is that naivety? Well, okay, what the naivety is, we can all debate it, right? We'll debate it, and the kind of cliche, the cliches, we'll have a debate, and the best ideas will win. But to believe that, you must be immature or lying to yourself. People who are honest, an honest and mature person who observes the patterns of human society, if they're honest, they must know that it's not necessarily that the best ideas win. Right? Sometimes we see, if people are debating, oftentimes the person who wins the debate is the person who's able to make the other person look stupid. It's the person who's able to insult the other person more effectively. Or who wins is the person who's got more money to convince everyone else that they're correct, right? Or the person who wins is the person who's nearer the powerful and influential people. And because they're nearer the powerful and influential people, they can push their ideas onto everyone else because, you know, I'm friends with the powerful and influential, they agree with me, so we must be correct. It's not necessarily the case that whatever's most true necessarily wins in Kali Yuga. And this is the sadness of the Kali Yuga. The sadness of the Kali Yuga is people, the majority of living entities, we take birth with such a big heart, isn't it? You see people when they're young, innocent, open. We come into this world often with such a big heart, and we leave the world with such a closed heart. And that journey from birth to death is the journey of the heart chakra closing down. Why? Because we didn't find the love that we were seeking. We didn't find the quality of love that we were seeking. And that means we didn't find Krishna. For those who come to Krishna consciousness, then the story is different. The story is different. Now, it's very, very interesting here. So first of all, Lord Krishna, he offered his obeisances unto his mothers, not just one, look at that, mothers. So in this period of civilization, there was what's called polygamy. So in many cases, not every case, but in many cases, a man would marry more than one wife, but it would only be in a cultured civilization where he could take care of all of them. I was reading something on this the other day, because sometimes people, when we look at something, we always look at the world through the lens of our own conditioning and through the lens of our own history. So in a modern society, people could look at this and, what are you talking about? How could a guy marry more than one woman? That's completely absurd. Like, you know, she has to share him and all that kind of stuff. But here, if we try to understand this culture from its own perspective, it's very interesting. Prabhupada, I was reading this the other day. He was explaining that one of the reasons for this is because generally in society, there are more women than men. So the idea of polygamy was not so that men could exploit women. The idea of polygamy was that the women would be cherished, they'd be protected. Now, there's a very, very interesting psychology behind this. Please really tune into this, because this is really, really important. The sign of protection, real protection, is actually the sign of love. What do I mean by this? Right? You may have something in your possession. You know, for someone, they may have like a particular like garment that they really like. And, you know, and because you like it, you treat it very carefully. You don't even wash it in the washing machine. You take it to the dry cleaners because it's very important to you. You want to protect it. For someone else, there may be something else that they value. Maybe you value your time. So therefore, you know, there's certain times in the day where you turn the phone off. It's on airplane mode. People can't reach you. You want to protect that time. Whatever it is, the thing that you protect is actually a sign of the thing that you value. So in the Vedic civilization, this idea of polygamy was that the women were really valued. They were truly valued. It was never the case that the women would be just left to fend for themselves so that they could be exploited by other unscrupulous men, actually. So the idea of this polygamy, and you can see this in this example here, because Devaki is Krishna's mother, Vasudeva is Krishna's father, but Vasudeva has more than one wife. But the mothers are headed by Devaki, you know. But look at that, the way that the fact that they are all loving Krishna in this way, embracing the Lord, right? He's embraced by the mothers present, and they have such affection. It means that they're all satisfied. That also means that they are all being treated, cared for properly. The fall down of modern civilization, we can actually say this, and this is something that my Guru Maharaj said a lot. The fall down of modern civilization is actually due to a lack of healthy feminine energy. So what we've done in our human society is we have minimized the healthy and mature feminine energy. What does that mean? Minimizing the energy of mother. Right? Here in this purple, it talks about 7 mothers: the real mother, the wife of the spiritual master, the wife of the brahmana, the wife of the king, the cow, the nurse, and the earth. It's very interesting. In Jyotish, in Vedic astrology, the moon, right? The moon represents mother, right? But the moon is also the mind. So it was known in human civilization that actually you can understand something about a person's mental state by understanding something about their relationship with their mother. It's an actual fact. It's an actual fact. Because what happens is when we're born, when we're young, we need that nurturing, that loving, that unconditional affection. And if one receives that, and it's meant to be received primarily from the mother, right? But also she's meant to be supported by her husband so that she can feel comfortable, stable, relaxed, and peaceful, so that she can then give that nurturing to others, right? To her sons and daughters, which means to the society. But when we have a society where it's such an intense competition for existence, right? Where in many cases, practically everyone has to work just to keep food on the table, then it can be a very stressful situation. So what happens in Kali Yuga so often is that either the parents aren't there, or the parents can be there physically, but they may not be there mentally and emotionally because they're so stressed. And then that then is reflected in the state of in the emotional life and the emotional state and in the mental stability of the children. So it is a crucial factor in Kali Yuga that the feminine, the mature, feminine, motherly nature is meant to be properly respected. Okay? What does our scripture say? It says in a society where, well, you know, we all know this, we've heard this before, where the cows, which is mother, women, mother, brahmanas, the elderly and children, in any society where these groups are not properly cared for, not properly protected, there'll be many negative reactions, you see? Now we hear it, but we don't really understand how those reactions will play. But this area of the Bhagavatam is giving us that clue. It's giving us that clue. When women are not properly cared for and protected and valued, right? When mothers are not properly cared for, protected and valued, it will then automatically affect actually the mental health of the entire society. You see? Manda sumanda, manda bhagya. What does Bhagavatam say? It says the people in Kali Yuga, they're always disturbed. Isn't that interesting? Always disturbed. The Bhagavatam is over 5,000 years old. It's giving predictions of what will happen in Kali Yuga, and we're seeing it. Mental disturbance means mental illness, mental instability. Now, of course, that's a starting point, but anyone through the process of Krishna consciousness can actually bring that to a higher level. All issues can be healed in the healthy application of Krishna consciousness. It's very, very interesting. This statement, all of them are mothers, even by this injunction of the Shastras, a stepmother who is the wife of the father is also as good as the mother, because the father is also one of the spiritual masters. It's so interesting. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine a while ago. You know, I was saying that one of the most heartbreaking things of Kali Yuga is sometimes we don't have the form or the substance, but sometimes we can have the form, but not the substance, right? So someone can be, let's say that someone is meant to be a leader of a country or a community. So they have the form of a leader, but they don't have the substance of a leader. What do I mean by the substance? It means, what are they meant to be doing? They're meant to be actually seeing that their citizens are happy. They're meant to be protecting their citizens, serving their citizens, being a role model for their citizens. Now what we see increasingly around the world are people in positions of power, you know, heads of state, heads of countries, and they just use that position to cheat the people, to amass personal wealth, and even to allow policies and rules in their society which are not even helping their citizens, but which is just being done so that they can make money. So some big company says, let me pollute your country and I'll give you a bribe and I'll give you a percentage of the profits. And that head of state, they don't care about their people. They're thinking, well, I'm in a position of power. Let me just use, or rather abuse my power in order to get something for myself and to help the people. If they suffer, you know, as long as I don't suffer, and as long as maybe my immediate family don't suffer, I don't care. Now, of course, that's very, very short. It's a very short-sighted vision. Why? Because we know that downstream, no one gets away with anything. We know that president or that prime minister, that head of state who allows negative and sinful things to enter into his or her country, they will have to pay heavy karmic, they'll have to suffer heavy karmic punishment for not doing their job properly. So it's a very beautiful philosophy that we have. Why? Because really what the philosophy is doing is it's giving us a description of reality. Krishna doesn't want to interfere with the free will of these living entities. So what he does instead is he'll just let them know, look, you can do anything, you've got free will, but if you do this, this is the result that you get. Again, you've got free will, but if you do this, this is what it leads to. And if we're intelligent, sane individuals who truly want to be happy, then as Krishna points out through the scriptures, through Guru, through Sadhu, through scripture, when he points out the reactions to different behaviors, then an intelligent person is meant to think, right, if I exploit the people under me, what that means eventually is that I will have to suffer. I will also then have to take birth in a situation where I'm exploited in order to understand how my own behavior was wrong. Now, let me just take a moment to think about it. Do I want to suffer? No. Do I want to be exploited? No. Do I want to have to take birth in a situation where I'm on the receiving end of negative behavior from other people? No. So then if I don't want that, then what does that imply? Yeah, it probably means that I shouldn't exploit anyone else, because if I do, I'm going to have to suffer that myself. It's interesting, the Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam, both of them explain that individuals are self-interested. Prabhupada in some places, Krishna consciousness is our real self-interest. It's a very beautiful statement. It's a very beautiful statement. What he's basically saying is the happiness that we're looking for, if you want that happiness without any kind of negative reaction, then the solution is to really engage sincerely in Krishna consciousness and arrange your life in such a way that you can make Krishna the center. It's such a beautiful and liberating understanding, because in one sense, there's a difference between pain and suffering. You see, someone can be in pain, but they know what's going on and they know it's going to end, and you know, it's just like something short. For example, the mother may be in pain when she's giving birth to the child, but she knows that it's actually tolerable. In giving birth to that child, I'm going to bring new life into the world, which I can love and which I can serve, and who will reciprocate with me as they grow. And I can see that, I can see the affection I invest in that child as the child grows and develops. So it's a temporary situation, but suffering is something different. Suffering is when you're going through pain and you don't even know why, and there's not even a good reason for it, you know? And that's tamas, that's the mode of ignorance. And that's where so much of human civilization is caught up. And it's due to a lack of this transcendental knowledge. It's due to a lack of being able to understand, right? Oh, Omagyanati Mirandasya, right? We honor the spiritual master because he opens our darkened eyes and fills our heart with transcendental knowledge. He allows us Scripture, sadhu, and guru allows us the vision to see, right, I've still got free will. I can do whatever I want, but now I can see what each behavior is going to lead to. You know, life is about decisions, and decisions are about destiny. You see, life is about decisions, and decisions are about destiny. It is so heartbreaking when we sometimes see people do things and you think, wow, clearly this person doesn't understand what that's going to lead to. They don't understand. You're there eating that steak, and they don't understand that by eating that flesh, it's going to lead to certain negative outcomes. It can lead to negative outcomes in this life. It will lead to negative outcomes in this life and even other things beyond. You know? So the power of Krishna consciousness is actually, in one sense, its ability to help us to make informed decisions about the same goal that everyone has. We all want to be happy. You know, I had this Ayurvedic checkup. It's actually over a year ago now. But I was just checking some of the points which were made recently, and I heard something. I thought, wow, that's such an incredible point. So the Ayurvedic doctor was telling me, because we were talking about immunity and, you know, physical health and, you know, diet and things like that. And then she said something to me which was really like, and I was like, wow, this is such an amazing point. She said to me, she said, actually, what really builds immunity is happiness. That's what she told me. She said, actually, what really builds immunity is happiness. And when I thought about that, I was meditating on that, it then became so obvious to me, no wonder there's so many health issues in the world, you know, because people aren't actually happy. And that's actually affecting their physical, mental, emotional states when people are unhappy, you know. And I was, you know, there's some things that we're working on in that area, that there's so many things that can be done just to position ourselves in a way that we are stronger and happier. So my Guru Maharaj, he used to speak about this. And then I found some research which was also talking about this. So for example, so in my day-to-day job, one of the things that we teach leaders is about resilience, so personal well-being and resilience. And it's because it's obvious that if a leader's really burnt out, stressed, unhappy, it will affect his or her ability to help other people. You know? So one of the things we were explaining about this, when we look at the research, and this is important for our spiritual communities and our relationships, one of the things that we see is, for example, if someone, let's say that there's a devotee and they're going through something, they're having a difficult time emotionally or otherwise, and then someone reaches out to that devotee and just says, you know, I just saw you looked a little bit unhappy, is everything okay? According to the research, when we're going through something and someone who cares about us reaches out to us and just asks, you know, are you okay? According to the research, immediately all the markers for stress go down. All the markers for stress go down. Why? Why? Because we're built for authenticity and attachment. We're looking for relationship, that's attachment, connection. But we're looking for relationships where we can also be ourselves. That's the authenticity. And again, as above, so below. On the pure spiritual platform, the living entities is very interesting. They're even more individualistic than you see on the Earth planet right now. Right? You know what really brings out your own individuality? What really brings out the individuality of a person is the degree to which they feel loved and accepted unconditionally. I have a friend in the UK, Ruben. He told me something very, very interesting because he's really researched many of these topics. He said to me, it was so incredible. He said that what's meant to happen in a traditional society is that the parents aren't meant to be struggling by themselves to bring up the children. Right? So he explained that in the Vedic or traditional, not even Vedic, even in healthy traditional cultures, what actually happens is that the parents are there with so many others, right? So the mothers, they don't struggle to bring up the child by themselves while the fathers are working. No, there's so many aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, grandparents, and they're all there. So the child gets the affection of all those relatives. And he explains this to me many years ago. He said that the quality of the affection that's given by grandparents is different to the quality. It's not worse than, it's just a different flavor of the quality of love given by the aunts and uncles. That's different to the quality of love given by the older brothers and sisters. That's different to the quality of love given by the other relatives. And so the child is actually literally bombarded with different flavors of affection. And what that does is it refines the quality of their character. It's very, very interesting. So we're built for this authenticity and attachment. So we want to be real. We want to be ourselves, because what does Krishna say in the Bhagavad Gita? Every person acts according to their nature. What good will repression do? I'm sure many of us have seen situations where in order to be accepted, a person feels they've got to repress who they actually are. And of course, it doesn't work, because whatever's repressed, if it's a healthy aspect of our nature and it's repressed, it will just come out in some other way. So it never leads to a stable relationship when people repress. At the same time, part of our need is for attachment. So you get extremes in human society. One group, I don't care about other people, I'm just going to be myself. Well, no, that's not quite what we mean by that. When we talk about individuality, we mean the healthy expression of our individuality. Being selfish is not a healthy expression of our individuality. You go onto the social media, everyone will talk about being themselves, but unless we define it properly, people can think that being myself means to be selfish, obnoxious, rude, disrespectful, and then the person wonders why they're alone. So you can have one extreme of so-called individuality, but in a lower mode, and then no one wants to be with that person anyway. Or you can have the other extreme where I'm so fearful of being accepted that I will just literally torture and repress myself just so that people will like me and people will accept me and people will see me. But of course, eventually it just causes some kind of dysfunction, because constant repression leads to other kinds of issues later on. What we're meant to be doing in the healthy society is being ourselves, our best selves for Krishna. What we're meant to do in a healthy society is to express our energies, but to channel our energies as we relate to each other in ways which are healthy, wholesome, nourishing, and ultimately that elevate our consciousness back to the spiritual platform. And then if we do that, which is really contingent, it's really contingent on recognizing and honoring healthy feminine energy, right? It's a very interesting point. I always feel it's a sign from Krishna. It keeps coming up. The women make the men and the men make the women. You know, it's such an interesting point. I was in Mayapur earlier this year for the ISKCON Leadership Sangha. Shubha Vilas, actually, he messaged me. He's in the UK right now. He was there and he was giving a seminar, and he was giving a seminar on leadership. And it's from the Ramayana, right? So Ramayana is a great history, Lord Ram, his epics, etc., his adventures. There's a conversation in the Ramayana where Lord Ram is speaking. I think he's speaking to Lakshman or Bharat. I think it's Lakshman. And one of the things that he asks in deciding whether someone can be a leader, he's asking, does this person have a good relationship with their mother? It was so amazing. And then I found the same point that came up again. There's a devotee who's again studies some of these aspects of Vedic culture. It is said that if the son has a good relationship with his mother, it will help him to have a better quality of interactions with women. Because the male child needs that motherly energy. But also what happens is when he gets it in a healthy way, he internalizes it. And then as he grows into a man, it helps him to have greater quality of respect and appreciation for women in general. Isn't that amazing? He has greater respect because he's internalized some of that feminine energy through his motherly, through the interactions when he was very young with his mother. Then he grows into the man who has that balance. So he's still masculine, right? Because sometimes people get it mixed up and they try and make out that men should become like women, women should become like men. No, you should. So he's still masculine, but with the ability to be both soft-hearted, compassionate, respectful, etc. Right? So he has a predominance of the masculine qualities, but the internalization in a healthy way of those tender qualities, which are traditionally considered feminine. And of course, the same thing for the woman, right? So she will have, if she has a good relationship with her father, she'll internalize healthy masculine energy. So she'll be predominantly feminine, but she also has that strength, that ability to be responsible, dutiful, to have boundaries. So each gender is the other side of the same coin. The men make the women and the women make the men. And in our hyper-competitive society, if we look at it, we will see that our focus on unhealthy masculinity is now causing so many other issues. So the solution is not one or the other. It's we need both, but in their healthy, balanced, or we could say even sattvic expression. And that is why we often find that when people are very spiritual, you'll see that they have this very healthy balance, this very healthy ability to be both traditionally, let's say, strong and compassionate, to be no nonsense or direct, and at the same time considerate of other people's feelings. So this is really powerful. And so in summary, what we can take from this verse is that when the relationships are proper, when we have that balance, which comes through deep Krishna consciousness and healthy interactions, when we have that balance, it nurtures, empowers, and strengthens everyone. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll stop here and let's open up for some questions, comments, etc.
Thank you, Prabhu, for really, really enlightening class. Lots of, I would say, important points which you highlighted. I just noted few. One, personalism. You started from that, and it reminded me very nicely that when we talk about personalism in ISKCON, normally we think or talk about deity, yeah, like Krishna is personal and all, we should not be impersonal and all. But personalism also, you very much emphasize that it applies to devotee also. So how we take care of all the devotee and everybody, that's like a personalism. And also you mentioned that society is struggling due to lack of feminism strengths. Yeah. And in fact, today verse was very interesting verse in one way, because it talked about 7 mother. Yeah. And in India, they are celebrating Mother's Day.
Yeah.
So very much coincidence that we are discussing about this particular verse and on this particular day. So very nice. You also mentioned, Prabhu, like life is about decision, yeah, and decisions lead to destiny. It's very important that what decisions we are taking, and that's definitely going to define our destiny for this birth and for futures. Also, you mentioned that happiness lead to strong immunity, yeah, based on your Ayurvedic doctor conversation, and that's true fact. And healthy society, you emphasized that it has to be healthy, wholesome, and it nourish our consciousness to Krishna consciousness. So thank you very much, Prabhu, for really wonderful class. I will really request all the devotees. If you have any questions, I can already see 2 hands raised. But if you have any questions which you would like to type in chat window, then you can please type. I can read on your behalf. And also I request devotees to please switch on your video if possible. It gives very different and talks about his personalism. So it gives a personal feeling and personal atmosphere. So Silpesh Prabhu, please go ahead.
Krishna Bhutabhavana Das. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj and Sri Prabhupada. I just wanted to say what a wonderful, wonderful class, and so many beautiful points in there. For my own life, I've grown up in that traditional Vedic system where I've always had my grandparents with us, still living with my parents. And, you know, I really, as an adult now, I really, really appreciate that and how valuable that was, having both my grandmother. I mean, she only passed away about 5-6 years ago at the age of 94. So, you know, I'm very lucky to have had those experiences, although I only realized how lucky I am as an adult. Obviously, growing up in London as a teenager and, you know, different cultures sort of, you know, being experienced and telling, you know, like pulling us in different directions. It was a very different story. But yeah, some very beautiful points about how strong mothers are really important. And I've had strong mothers, strong mother-in-law, strong aunties. So, you know, it's all benefited in how I've grown up, and they're still there. I still talk to my aunts. I give them a call sometimes, and it's very valuable. So yes, thank you for all these wonderful points, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shilpesh Prabhu. Thank you for sharing.
Rishabh Prabhu, please go ahead.
Oh, Rishabha Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
You're in
Sorry,
touch.
I'm just yeah, please. I'm just listening to a class, and one thing that I wanted to ask, because I'm reading like with a few devotees, young devotees, second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and in the verse 32, Srila Prabhupada mentions like Arjuna wanted to renounce Kshatriya dharma. He wanted to go for, you know, take sannyas in the woods. So it said like, you know, what the point of suppressing your nature as a Kshatriya to go and be like renunciate, because you will anyway be pushed by the gunas to actually act as a Kshatriya anyway.
Yeah.
So in this regard of your saying that we should kind of be connected to our nature, is this conditioned nature from the gunas, or is like, and how this relates to the like unconditioned nature of our swarup? So can you maybe comment on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's such a big topic, but I'll just share one or two things on this. First of all, we're servants. See, we have to really establish, first and foremost, we're servants of Krishna. That's really important. That's who we are. But there's more to it than that. You see, it's like this. Let's say that you need to pick up your guru from the airport, okay? So that's the goal. So the goal is the service. Guru Maharaj is at the airport. We need to pick him up. But then the question is, what's the vehicle that we're able to use to get there? You see? So our physical body and our subtle body, it's the vehicle that we're able to use in this lifetime. You know, so it's I think I was reading this. I was actually reading it's Sankalpa Kaumudi by Shiv Ramaraj. There's a wonderful chapter, and it's all about taming the mind. And this is, I'm so excited about it, and I'll tell you why. See, the nature that you have, it means you have a certain type of mind and intelligence and ego, false ego. That's got nothing to do with your spiritual identity, right? The psychophysical nature we have here has nothing to do with our spiritual identity. However, because we have a different type of mind, our minds, each of us have a slightly different type of mind and intelligence. If you understand how your mind works, it makes it easier for you to practice spiritual life. Shiv Ramaraj writes about that in the Sankalpa Kaumudi. Because, for example, I'm going to ask everyone to make sure they're muted. Okay, so I'll explain what I mean by this. I know for myself, this is something that I'm working on. I'm always trying to figure out how does my particular mind work, right? Because if I know how my mind works, I know what I need to give my particular kind of subtle body in order for it to be easier to focus on spiritual life. I saw, and I was just making some reflections on this. My intelligence is super active, right? It always wants to know everything. I was just in Germany with Satyananda Maharaj. We were in a place called Simulachan. We were there from the Shingadev's appearance day. And so, you know, we were communicating, we were talking, and he told me something which I already knew about my mind. He was just kind of reminding me, Bhutabhavana, he basically told me that your mind is interested in so many different things. You have to kind of keep it a bit reined in, you know, in order to move forward. And the day I got initiated, my Guru Maharaj said the same thing. Before I got initiated, my name was Eddie. And he said, Bhakta Eddie, he wants to know everything. That's what he actually said on the day of my initiation. So anyway, the reason why I'm saying this is because if you understand how your subtle body works, you'll be able to figure out how to engage it in such a way that it's able to focus on Krishna, right? There's a seminar, and I can send it to you if you wish. There's a two-part seminar called Scriptural Study and Preaching by Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. Now he says in that seminar, he says everyone should read. He said, but if your intelligence is a big part of your subtle body, then if you don't read, then your mind will send you to hell. You may have seen that with some devotees. Everyone should read Prabhupada's books, but for some devotees, they can read just a little bit, and that's enough for them to keep focused and move on. For other devotees, their intelligence is such a strong part of their psychophysical nature that it's almost like it needs to chew on more knowledge before it then is peaceful, which then allows them to focus in a certain way. You see? So when we're talking about natures, I see it again and again, you know, it's just a question of how do I engage what I am, or, you know, or the vehicle that I have. So if you're picking up your Guru Maharaj, the aim is the same. We're all trying to get to the airport. But if you've got a motorcycle, you can move along certain small, narrow lanes to get to the airport. If you've got a helicopter, you can go above the traffic to get to the airport. If you've got a lorry, it may be a bit of a slower drive to get to the airport. If you've got a Porsche or a sports car, you may be able to drive a bit faster to get to the airport. You have to see what vehicle I have. And then based upon the vehicle, that will give you clues as to how to get to that destination as effectively as possible. You see, the trouble is if we don't know that, then people struggle unnecessarily, right? You know, many of us, we know devotees, some devotees, you know, they do if they engage in management, they get absorbed, and the mind gets really absorbed and it becomes really Krishna conscious, because that's a way of absorbing what they are in Krishna's service. For someone else, if they had to do management, it'll just be distressing. Now, don't get me wrong, we should be ready to do the needful whenever possible. That's really important. So Satyananda Maharaj, he mentioned to a few of us that there's an amazing devotee, Gauranga Darshan Prabhu. He's doing this Bhakti Vaibhav. Okay, so we joined the Bhakti Vaibhav, and while I was in Germany, there was a Q&A. The question came up about service according to your nature. He said that actually we should be ready to do anything. He says, but he said sincerity is not necessarily the same as ability. The sincerity is I'm ready to do anything, but then it's also a question of what can you do well, you see? So some people, as one of my good friends reminded me recently, some people, they're doers. They're not necessarily so strategic to think everything through, but if you just tell them do this task, they can do it, you know, like that. So someone else, they may be more intellectual, you know. If you tell them just to organize all day, they'll sincerely do their best, but the quality may not be so good because they're not so hardwired to think in an organizational way. So the point is, we should be ready to do the needful always. At the same time, where we have choice, and that often comes as we mature in Krishna consciousness, right? Where we have choice, as we mature in Krishna consciousness, we should try to see where can I offer the best service? Because otherwise what happens is, let's say you're doing a retreat, but you're not good at management, then everyone gets a poor experience of the retreat, not because you're not sincere, you're sincere, but this just isn't, you're just not very good at this, this particular activity. You're sincere, sincerity is absolutely there, but the skills, the competence, the execution isn't so good, you know, and vice versa. So in summary, first of all, our psychophysical nature in this world has nothing necessarily to do with our eternal spiritual identity, nothing necessarily to do with that. Second, we should be ready to do whatever is required, right? Because it's first and foremost about the destination. It's about service to Guru, service to Krishna. That's first, that's primary. Now, having established that point, that I want to serve, then the last consideration is, you know, based upon the kind of vehicle I have, how can I best get that vehicle to Gurudev? How can I best get that vehicle to the destination? You see, that's the order of prioritization. Does that make some sense, Rishabha?
It's I have a follow-up question. They said when the person matures, and I'm sorry, the devotees asked me to move. So they say when they mature, then they should start to look how they can engage more in their physical nature. Even though, is it that if we engage devotees early on in their Krishna consciousness, in their nature, is that speeds up their maturity or not exactly?
No, it can be done at any time. But the reason why I say mature is because the first thing to establish is actually the service mentality. You see, that's why in the beginning stages, the first thing to establish is that I'm happy to serve. I want to serve. I want to please Guru. I want to please Krishna. I want to please the Vaishnavas. Now, I've been studying this because I'm just, you know, putting together some things on this topic. It's interesting. So to your point, this is the irony. If people are able to play to their strengths, it makes it easier for them to do the needful. You see, when I was reflecting on this and putting some notes together, I was what came to my mind is like an elastic band. Okay, so for example, if the elastic band is normally in its normal condition, right, and that could be analogous to doing things that you have some ability for, then if something happens that you need to stretch the elastic band, it can stretch, no problem. But if you're stretching the elastic band all the time, what's going to happen to the elastic band eventually?
Maybe break or maybe deform.
Yeah, it's going to break actually. So the point is, if people are able, when possible, because again, our movement isn't at a stage where you can just say, I want to do this and do that. And by the way, acting according to nature doesn't mean that you just do the things that you like doing. That's also another misunderstanding. It's not just, oh, I like doing this, I don't like doing that. No, that's not what it's talking about. Everyone has certain universal things that we can all do. Everyone can cook. Actually, everyone can do management, interestingly enough, but on a small scale. But people who've got a certain nature, they can do it on a larger scale and they can do it continuously. So the skills of all four varnas, everyone has them, right? And the proof that everyone has them is that every functional adult will use all of these skills in their day-to-day life. It doesn't matter who you are. Let's say you're not business-minded, but you're going to be able to look after your budget in your household, right? That's just a normal thing that everyone has to do. You may not be a kshatriya, but if you have a family, you're going to be able to lead your family. So on a small scale, everyone has all the skills of all the varnas. The difference is that if someone has that nature, they can do that same skill set continuously, right? On a day-by-day basis, effectively, and they can get certain outcomes without it becoming a source of real stress or difficulty. You see? So there's an overlap. Everyone has all those skill sets, but to do it consistently over a long period of time and to do it well, that can indicate that it's actually a nature. Yeah, so that's my point. So we're ready to do the needful. We want to establish the service mentality. And then having done that, then whenever there's a need, we can do what we need to do. But whenever there's opportunity, we can play to our strengths, not for ourselves only, okay? But more because if we do that, we can offer a better quality of service, at least externally, to everyone else. There's one other reason why this is important. And Krishna makes this point in the Bhagavad Gita. See, if you're doing things according to your nature when it's appropriate, then what happens is it's easier for you to do it without the desire for prestige. You see, when you act according to your nature, it's easier to do it with detachment. So in the Bhagavad Gita, these two things are mentioned. Sakam, Kama Mishra Bhakti, and Nishkam, Kama Mishra Bhakti. Sakam means with attachment. I'm doing something, but I'm very attached. And especially if it's not my nature, then I'll be even more desperate for you to tell me how great I am and how wonderful I am, because I'll be needing all the external validation. Whereas if it's more in my nature, I can do it with more detachment. You see, I can do it with more of an ability to really give the full fruits of what I'm doing to Krishna. So again, when we're younger, it doesn't matter as much. When we're younger, it still matters, but the primary thing is to establish the service mentality. But as we go older, what should happen in a healthy society is as we go older, then we're maybe differentiating. You have a particular service, right? Because, and I'll tell you why, that's also scientific. It's because when we're older, we've got less physical energy. Usually we've got other responsibilities coming on. So we've got marriage responsibilities, maybe family responsibilities. So if you're stretched in your day-to-day work and you're stretched in your relationships and you're stretched in your health, again, the analogy of the rubber band. You see, I've studied this very carefully. I saw that when someone is young, when the devotees are young, they don't, the fact that they are maybe or may not acting according to their strengths, it's less of an issue because it's the only thing that they're doing. Who pays the bills? Mom and dad pay the bills, right? How much time do they have? They got loads of time because they're going to school. In fact, when you're at university, you've got a few classes here and there, a few lectures, and most of the time you're not doing anything. That's not real life. That's not, you try doing that when you're 35, you know, try doing that when you got a job. So then you see, it's a science. You know, you had more room to stretch when you're young, but now you've got all these other responsibilities on top. So if you're stretching all the time on top of your full-time work, on top of your marriage responsibilities, on top of your health, maybe challenges, on top of your having to deal with the children, it's asking for more stress than the person, would necessarily have to buy into. Does that answer your question, Vrishabha?
I think it's okay for now. Maybe we can speak later.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
We can speak later. I know we've got time in the diary, so we can carry on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to say Haribol to Radha Bhakti. I saw your question, so I'm going to try and answer your question now. So how can we answer the materialists who say that the concepts of feminine and masculine are constructs? Very good question. I understand the Vedic perspective, but how do we explain that to others in a digestible, logical way? It's a great question. And I'll just share my approach, and I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that my approach is the only one. I read this also, it's incredible. So again, as I was studying Sankalpa Kaumudi, so one of the things which are mentioned, I think it's in Sankalpa because I was studying a few books yesterday, but you see, oh no, that's it. I remember where it's from. This is from, it's from a seminar by Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj, and it's on stages of spiritual development. So he's making the point about Shraddha, the stage of Shraddha. And so at the stage of Shraddha, one has some appreciation for the devotees. That's actually where it starts. Actually, Shraddha Sadhu Sangha, there's some appreciation for the devotees, but that appreciation is not based necessarily on knowledge, because at that stage, one doesn't have really deep understanding about Krishna consciousness and who the devotees are, but they just have some faith and appreciation for devotees. That's at the early stages, Shraddha Sadhu Sangha. So at that early stage, that faith is also indicative of some Sukriti. Now, why is this important? To Mal Krishna Maharaj, they used to do preaching at universities. And what did they do? They would distribute prasadam. And then they would say to people, so how's the food? How did you find the food? And if the person said, that was delicious, I really love the food, it was a sign. They could understand the fact that this person appreciates some aspect of Krishna consciousness means that they have some sukriti from a previous life. And then, because you have so many people to speak to, they would focus on the people who showed some appreciation, because that indicates that they've got some sukriti. They've already built some spiritual credit in the bank account. So now if you speak to those people, they're more likely to say yes and to take their spiritual journey further on. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because in relation to your question, the first thing to do is to consider how much can this person hear? You see? So I always start there. I try to understand who I'm dealing with. I'm trying to understand what's their sukriti. How much can they hear? Because if they can't hear certain things which are a bit more, let's say, antithetical or a bit more against the common modern narrative, then I wouldn't go into that conversation. I would keep it on. I would try to build their spiritual credit more by reinforcing some things that they are more easily able to assimilate at this time. You see, so we can consider that for the aspects of our philosophy which are less mainstream and a bit harder to accept, one would have to have more spiritual credit to assimilate it. You see, because it's a bit more different than the norm, you know? So that's the first consideration I would have. Now, if for some reason, situationally, we had to get into it, I would then consider what are the sources of authority that this person accepts. So if, for example, they accept the authority of social scientists, then I would bring, and they do exist, and I can share them if it's something you're interested in. I would share the research by social scientists which talk about the differences between men and women and how these differences are also perceived at a very young age. And there's also some research which shows that these differences are also perceived cross-culturally. You see? So then it would then be evidence to say that it's not just a social construct, but actually we see it across cultures. We see it in groups where people haven't even been socialized yet. And we still see these differences there. And there's been experiments on this. What was one experiment? They ranked countries by the degrees to which those countries had very egalitarian policies, right? Which is like men and women can do anything, right? They ranked countries, and the ones which were the most egalitarian, they looked to see if we're in those societies which are the most egalitarian, where men and women are freely able to make their choices about what kind of work they do. They found that the differences between the choices of the occupations that men choose and the choices of occupations that the women choose, they are even more they're more polarized than in less egalitarian societies. In other words, when you give men and women free choice about what they want to do, and you take away the stigma, and you don't say that these jobs are better than these jobs, then you find that women lean more into jobs where there's more relational aspects, and men lean even more into jobs where it's more kind of, gadget, let's say technology, mechanical aspects. Now, of course, the other thing to bear in mind is when we talk about these differences, there's a spectrum. You see, this is another misunderstanding people have. They think, well, that means that all women like these jobs and all men like those jobs. No, that's not what the scripture is saying. What the scripture is actually saying is that everything being equal, the average man tends to lean in this direction and the average woman tends to lean in this direction. But everything being equal is, of course, a construct, because in the life of any particular man or woman, there are a range of other influences, not just their gender. You see? So our upbringing, our nationality, our age, our varna, all of these also play an influence in terms of what we do. But but the literatures in our tradition, when they talk about differences between men and women, what they're doing is just like when you learn maths. when you learn maths, you isolate one thing first and just try to understand that thing in isolation. And then when you use it in the real world, you take it as one factor, and then there are also other factors which also altogether lead to a certain outcome. Yep. So men and women in terms of differences are there, but it's a spectrum. So you can have an atypical man and you can have an atypical woman, you see? But if you take the average man and the average woman, then certain leanings, certain tendencies are there. And that's what the scripture is talking about. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, going back to your point specifically, I will look to see what's their authority, who do they accept as an authority, and I'll try to present the differences through the lens of that particular authority. So if they're into social science and psychology, I would share some research from that perspective, which talks about that. If they have faith in the scripture, I will talk about it through the lens of the scriptural authority. So I'd have to see where do they have faith and try to bring the teaching or the conclusion through that particular lens. I hope that makes some sense.
That was great. Thank you so much, Bhutabhavana Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm conscious I'm over time.
Yes. So,
Yes.
Yeah, Prabhu, I'm also conscious of your time. It's already 20 minutes over. We don't have any further questions or any comment, Prabhu. If it's okay with you, with your permission, we can close this today's session.
Sure. No problem at all. No problem at all.
So thank you very much, devotee, for joining today's session. And thank you, Bhutabhavana Prabhu, for your valuable time. Really appreciable, and so much nice information through questions and also through initial presentation. So Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki jai, His Grace
Jai.
Bhutabhavana Prabhu ki jai, Anant Koti
Srila
Vaishnava
Prabhupada
Vrinda
ki
ki
jai.
jai.
Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa
Sindhu
Sindhu
Vyevacha. Patitanam Bhavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namo
Namo.
Namah.
Okay.